Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to inspiring leaders who are making waves and creating ripples on our metaphorical pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is not a duck, but that is what makes them awesome. Now, get ready to go on a deep dive. Now, today, my guest on this very special edition 100th episode is Ketan Kulkarni. Ketan was invited specifically for this podcast to talk about his new book, Soar. Soar is all about personal growth, self awareness, and having the courage to discover yourself on this journey that we call life. I wanted to showcase Ketan in his book because it speaks directly to the purpose of this podcast, making yourself better to help make others better, and ultimately to better the pond. I highly recommend reading this book and connecting with Ketan. Thank you, Ketan, for everything that you do to better the pond. All right, Ketan Kulkarni, hailing all the way from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now, I am absolutely honored to have you here as a guest on the 100th episode of the Better the Pond podcast. Ketan, it is so great to have you here today.
That is wonderful. Really honored to be on the 100th episode. And it really shows how you've been consistently creating the impact. It really feel honored and very happy to be here. Always love our chats.
Yes, I love our chats as well. So, you were a guest on the podcast here in July of 2023. So, it was just over a year ago now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and at that time, we sort of talked about you, what you were doing, and how you're making the world a better place. And today, on the 100th episode, the special edition, we want to talk really about a totally different subject. We want to talk about your new book, Soar.
Yeah, that is true. And
So,
very exciting.
yes, and very exciting. I'm excited about this. I have to tell you that much. So, just so for the audience, getting back to so who you are. So, again, all the way from Halifax, Nova Scotia. We know that you're born in India, and then of course came to Canada. But you're a physician, you're a researcher, and I think last I checked, I think you wrote 125 papers. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, a few more. Yes.
a few more. You're author of two books. The one we're going to talk about today is Soar. We'll get to that. But the first one is a legendary quest, so we can
Right.
give a little bit of background on that too. And you're also a multiple award winner as well. So you have got a ton of credentials, Ketan.
No, no. I mean, it's true. It's true that it's great to have a lot of external accolades, but as you know, it all comes down to having purpose, impact, and meaning, and all of these things support our journey and helps us find the fuel for the next step. So thank you for that kind introduction. It really feels good to be on the journey and have all the tribe, like people like yourself and others, be together and support each other's progress.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you said that was quite interesting, Kitan, is that, you can have all the external accolades, you can have all the awards and all those kind
True.
of things like that. And they're nice. They're nice to have, but which is interesting and back to the legendary quest and sword,
Yeah, yeah,
is that that's not who you are. It's just things that you've
not at
done.
all. Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, going back very briefly to the legendary quest, as COVID happened, the whole issue of physician burnout and healthcare crisis, everything came to the global forefront. And soon we realized that, nobody, we as in the greater we, a lot of friends, family, peer group, physicians and non-physicians, that how many times are we asked, we look successful, but how many times do we get asked, do you feel successful? And the answer isn't good. A lot of people, experts, international level speakers that I see and talk to, we adore them and they're great and they're very successful on the paper or on the screen. But when I talk to them, it didn't translate. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Oh my, it's too busy. Oh, I can't go to that ICU. I could never again want to see them again. It's like the distress level, it's almost like visceral discontent. And it's not limited to medicine in any way. It's in every field. We know that there's data for that. And that's where I think a lot of our work overlaps. How do we identify the core predictors of alignment and authenticity and really work with the tools we have to give us truly authentic success and fulfillment. I think that's what started the first book as a journey. And then somebody said, well, you got all this data here, it's great, but can you tell me a story? And then I kind of, yeah, you're just too lazy to read it. I mean, the Legend Request was the 2023 BIBA International Competition self-help book winner. So I said, well, you just put in the effort. But soon I realized that, they were right. This friend said what they had suggested is that, stories are part of human fabric and culture, right? I mean, it's so deeply intertwined into the global culture that, one day I was walking in the park and Soar's story dawned. I said, yeah, this guy was right. I mean, I could really do this. And we could intertwine the principles of the Legend Request into a nice fable that would be very meaningful, and you've read the book. I mean, you sort of know what happens, but
Mhm.
that's what fueled it, that, how do we reach out to more people? How do we prove to people that everybody has a soar in them, and then you can soar? I mean, soar is used purposefully as a pun intended. I mean, it's the main character. That's the journey of an eagle, but soar also means, progressing, growing, challenging yourself, and becoming greater than who you are. And it all comes down to your personal journey, right? Because it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks. If we don't think, we feel, and are successful, the rest is water under the bridge. So that's what fueled Soar. And it's been great. I mean, it's been about 6 to 8 months, and we've already had, over 65-star reviews on different platforms, all authentic, reviews. And we've got 4 international awards and many more hopefully to come. So it's been gratifying, and now looking to reach out to more and more people and kind of join, make our tribe bigger.
Mhm. It's interesting what you said. You said, about having legendary quest and whatnot. So we got all this data, and then but somebody said, write me a story. So, no child ever went to bed and said, "Mommy, will you read me an Excel spreadsheet?"
Correct. But so correct. They want a story. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I started this whole Better the Pond podcast originally, Ketan, and it was at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole idea behind it was when I was hearing this, all the people complaining and the stress and the worry and all that was going on, and it was all real, but the narrative just seemed to be a lot of negativity.
Mhm.
In my head, it was like, so I can't support the negativity. That's just not how I work. So I want to be able to sort of say, well, what's the positive? And sometimes in a really bad scenario, it's hard to find the positive. But it was amazing as I reached out to people at the beginning of this whole thing was what people were doing to actually make the world a better place under really harsh circumstances that was global. People were still finding ways to make the world a better place, and they were creating ripples, and that's how this whole podcast all started. And of course it's evolved since then, to the point where, again, we were saying with the 100th episode.
Amazing.
But but interesting what happened, how it started off with was, what are people doing to help maybe their family? What are people doing to help community? What are people doing to help business? And that's, it sort of morphed. And one of the things that's really important to me, and that, that again, I'm honored to have you here, is because now when we get to talk about Soar is so much bigger. So Soar, I think, is a book that tells a great story at a time even now where, we need insight, we need
Mhm.
positivity, we need
Yeah.
encouragement, right? We need authenticity,
Your authenticity.
we need transparency, and we need to believe in something bigger,
Yeah.
because the world got really, in my opinion, got really siloed.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting that, when I started this podcast, that it was about, family and community. And now I get to talk to you about what are you doing, what SOAR, the book, is doing to actually impact the world. So this has gone from very small to global. And this is the conversation that I want to have with you today.
No, I agree so much. I mean, as you were talking about sort of the genesis of your podcast, and it resonates so much, right? I mean, there was so much negativity and negative connotation, and you were, pretty much isolated to your homes or dwellings. And there was innumerable challenges. And yet, like you said, people found new ways, people found some gaps in time, they had almost like some free time to think
Mhm.
about. And a lot of people really made humongous progress, and all those journeys are now continuing and making, local, national, global strides. And it's really, you're right. I think, we are all part of this big global community, and looking to see what's out there that's global and how can we make a bigger difference, and have to hold on to something that's bigger than us, right? I mean, like we were just talking before the podcast, like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the climate crisis, the sustainability around leadership, sustainability around business, the healthcare in Canada, how is it going to be sustainable? Like there's so many high level questions that are there that we have to figure out truly innovative, cost effective, sustainable ways to try and answer those questions in our own ways. And that's where I think it would be amazing to sort of have Soar go, that, we create true impact. Instead of just telling a story, it should, like, how many of us remember a great story from childhood? All of us.
Mhm.
It still carries with us. We still carry the meaning. And if you look at our First Nation wisdom, even across Canada, everything, all the science was carried in stories, right? All the
Mhm.
messages were carried in stories. There, it doesn't matter if it's fictitious or real, or if it truly happened. I think the fabric of the culture anywhere in the world is carried through stories. And I think that's where this goes, that it's bringing those ideas and putting them together in some form that's very easy to remember, so that when you're in crisis, or when you need it the most, or whenever you face a challenge, or even in a happy moment, you quickly remember, it's, oh, okay, well, this is temporary. I
Mhm.
think there's more stuff, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or okay, maybe one more step, and we're going to be there, and maybe I got to change my perspective, maybe I have to trust, and maybe I have to change my circumstances, maybe I have to walk away, whatever the strategy is, except hope. I know you don't like hope as a strategy. So I think, yeah, what you say truly resonates.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Gatan, just out of interest sake. Is when we looked at, in the time of, let's just use COVID as an example, because
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
a global impact. But there was certain people, there was people like at the time where there was a lot of, what am I going to do? There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of uncertainty. And so then everybody sort of, then people shied away from it and sort of went into their shell.
yeah,
And there was certain people, or other people, I guess we should say, that actually grew from it and found opportunity and
100%.
found positivity. What do you think would drive, and this might go back into SOAR, but what do you think will drive that? What drives that decision to go one way or the other in humanity?
That's a deep question, and you're so right. I mean, going back to validating what you said, there's actually, being a physician, and there was dozens and dozens of physicians, a lot of new groups were started, information was shared, investing was discussed, personal sphere was discussed. There's so much that happened. I think it came down to who people truly are, like, I'm going to use an example from spirituality, right? I mean, often when people are faced with a challenge, with an accident, or a healthcare condition, or an acute crisis, or a severe illness, or, some sort of a loss, either financial, or loss of a loved one, or, loss of a pet, suddenly, some people will awaken, right? I mean,
Mhm.
life throws these challenges, and it's almost that some people will awaken from that and gain a new level of awareness. I think COVID did something like that to a bunch of people. It was like it was like a wake up call, and some people rose to that challenge, saying, okay, well, wait a minute, like, what am I doing? What's going on here? I don't need to, whatever the situation is, go through the grind. I need to relook at my situation. My kids are growing up too fast. I'm working too much. Maybe I'm not making enough money. Maybe I need to cut down my lifestyle and spend, time on my hobbies. Oh, wait a minute, I've practiced law for 15 years. I've lost all these hobbies. I don't like this. So,
Mhm.
there was a good proportion of people that just started waking up, and did wake up. I think, I think that why it happened to some people, I think maybe they were just ready for the change. Maybe they were ready for the growth. Maybe they were set up like that they were, through their journeys, they've always had, I've been reading this book, for one of the ancient wisdom books recently, and it cites so many examples from all parts of the world, that, people having these flash inspirations and writing something in the language they didn't know, or, Van Gogh painting this, like, you can't imagine that Van Gogh thought about those paintings. It has to be a splash. inspiration that just happened, right? I mean, it hasn't happened again in 150 plus years. So, there's this being part of this higher energy everywhere that possibly fuels this creativity. So, and some people were just ready. I think they took it as an opportunity and started building on it. And I think they're creating ripples. Like the energy is spreading to other people and places. And I think that's sort of how we met too, right? I mean, it's the cross collaboration between disciplines, right? I mean, 10 years ago, technology helped it. Like we're on this Zoom call. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can get on it and and say what you have to say. Like all this technology also supported all this cross collaboration. And it's been, yes, COVID was horrible, but it's also been phenomenal to give humanity a wake-up call as to what it truly is about, and what we can do in our overall limited lifespan. 100 years is a fair bit long lifespan for most humans, and in the grand scheme of the 15 billion years of universal history, it's not even a speck. So
Right.
it comes down to having to answer those greater questions that that have always haunted humanity, that who we are, what we want to do, and how do we create impact and meaning.
So moving forward on that point, I'd love to say about what you said about the sort of the higher energy and talking about Van Gogh. It must have been an aha, or something that was spiritual awakening, or something that basically found him. And this is where we're going to take this, because I think, in my opinion, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, is like, I think that Soar found you, and it's along the same lines. So on that note, there is Soar.
Oh, there you go.
There it is. All right. So first of all, Ketan, I know I want to read a bit of the forward, but I just want to say there's yourself, and then Christopher Morris and Francis Yu,
Yeah.
the three co-authors of this book. So did you want to say anything about Christopher and Francis and give them a shout out, because they're also part of this process?
Oh, huge, huge. And I think it couldn't have been done without both of those on the team. And it's true, I just want to tie the two pieces together. Like you said, it found me, right? I had a walk in the park, and when I came back in 15 minutes, I had this 1-page story that then, we built into a 10-page story. And then slowly over the next year, it became a book, and each of them brought in a different energy, three people, three different backgrounds, three countries, almost three continents, and it kind of worked together. And that was fantastic, the way we did it through online work, and, one passage at a time, and then one chapter at a time, and just took the time to put the story together, then added and subtracted, went through many revisions, and that's how it formed. We took out a few chapters because it felt like it was going too sideways. So we tightened the story. It was everybody's contribution was great. And then, as you know, my daughter did all the pictures in the book. So it became like a more of a family affair that,
Mm.
uh, I thought it would be, we could have illustrations, but there's nothing like having somebody hand draw the illustrations. And then, I was able to inspire her to do, random images. And then they were good enough that I said, well, we got to just include them in the book. And it's really been gratifying from that sense too, that it was a truly collaborative effort. It's not one person's work. There's different people had different flashes of inspiration, and they built on their, own experience and insight, and even spiritual experience. Like some of the paragraphs that came out are personified source experience, but they are true experiences of, either one of us or one or more of us in certain moments. Like when Soar goes to meet the walrus, the experience he has is a very spiritual experience that many people would have had in different circumstances. So it draws on those ideas that, you don't have to follow any religion to be spiritual. It's a whole, somebody asked me the other day, well, how do you then define spirituality? Like, isn't it part of an extension of a religion? I said, well, I'm not so sure about that. I don't think we need a definition. I said spirituality could simply be defined as alignment. You're just aligning yourself, not just at a physical level, but also at sort of a mental level, at emotional level, at a higher intellectual level, at a higher conscious level. So, that could be a separate talk in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all of us could have a degree of spirituality without following a box of any particular religion. So, and that's what I love about it. It binds humanity as a whole, without using any divisive metrics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Ketan, because I think that most people, and I'm not speaking on anybody's behalf, but we kind of equate religion and spirituality,
Yeah.
and religion really is a man-made sort of construct.
Yeah.
And we put things into boxes, and that's how it is. Yet, and I mean, I personally see spirituality as, I look at it as energy. It's just,
Yeah.
and is it harder to find? Absolutely, it's harder to find. But I'm not sure why we in our minds need to create make it divisive.
Yeah.
Right. And
Correct.
but I think to help people understand, we try to divide things down and break it down so it becomes easier.
Yeah.
But when you look at, and I'm sure, you've had it, I know that I've had it, is when I've had, spiritual experiences that, or when something just aligns and
Yeah.
it feels right. It just happens, and you can't explain it. You try to explain it, but it's like, I don't know. And so all those things that happen, maybe do we enjoy the experience, or do we really need to explain it?
True, and I've been fortunate recently to meet some, and I agree with you. I loved your definition too. It's energy. I mean, even from Einstein's equation, we know that E equals mc squared. It's all energy.
Mhm.
All we see matter at it, And I've had the fortune of meeting some spiritual masters who are genuine. They're not on social media. They're not showing off. They're working on themselves, chiseling away every day. And in their words, the higher the frequency of the person, the fewer people that are around, the less the people that get it. And there's
Mhm.
no raha about it, right? They're focused on self-development and enlightening themselves and making a positive difference to the world. And they couldn't care less if they had 10 likes or 10,000 likes. If any, they would run away from it. Like they would think that's ego. So
Right.
they would not talk about it, unless the person would get it. They just
Right.
wouldn't say anything. So one of the spiritual masters actually has some indigenous background too. He read Soar, and his review is there on some of the platforms, and he kindly agreed to write it. And he said, Soar would go as deep as the person would, and that was very moving. I had to
Mm.
sit down with him for an hour to kind of understand what he meant, and he had some great things to talk about. That the book goes as deep as you will. So if you read it as a story, that's fine. But if you use it as a game changing tool, so be it. You can still do it. And like you said, I think I also thought that if you have a spiritual realization, if it aligns, if it's an aha moment, what do you do with it? How do you align? Like there's nothing to do. In words of another person I've had the fortune of meeting with, he said it's just about being, and
Mm.
you don't have to do anything. You just learn that experience, you expand, you grow your consciousness, and that's great. And the more, and it goes back to legend request. It's all about self-awareness, and the more aware we become, the more aligned we become, and the more the physical plane changes. We become more productive, we become nicer, we become compassionate, and this and that, and we are able to handle our ego. I think it's an after effect. It's not a pre effect. And maybe we've got it backwards, right? I mean,
Mm.
sometimes we dismiss happiness or joy, ideas around happiness or joy or self development as Eastern philosophy. But I think, there's good evidence to show that a lot of time life follows, right? I mean, life follows who you are. It's the other way,
Mhm.
suddenly don't become happy. You know, if you're kind of a happy person, things align. It's a little
Well,
bit rigorous, I think, and it's hard. That's the hard part.
yeah, that is the hard part.
Apart from your chronic health conditions, I mean, as you start aligning people and taking away their cognitive stress, things start aligning. They come out of their chronic health conditions, and there's so much more evidence to show the ad even at a standard Western medicine level. There's enough evidence to show that chronic inflammation has some good association with chronic stress,
Mhm.
which means cognitive distress in most places. So yeah, I think it all aligns. If we change the vantage point, it all starts to align.
Right. One of the things I was going to mention to you that I thought was interesting is how your daughter, again, so she's also written a book of her own, but for her to do, all the images,
Yeah,
right? And I think it's really fascinating just on that, as I just thought of it, is that she sees the world through a child's eyes.
yeah,
So
yeah.
she sees Soar through a child's eyes. So she hasn't got she hasn't got the ego. She hasn't got all the cognitive stuff that's all in the way that we get as we age, right? She's probably sees it. My guess is she would see it through a clearer lens because she hasn't had enough time to get in her own way, shall we say?
Oh, I agree. And, the way it happened is that, I never told her that we're going to do this. I just kind of said, oh, well, can you draw this seagull for me? Okay. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do it. You did a couple of the usual child, right?
Yeah.
Then it came out good. I said, oh, it looks good. Then I said, well, can you draw this? And okay. Slowly we kept building. And then after a few pictures, I said, yeah, this is probably going to work. So I actually made her do all the 15, 16 pictures, and then we finalized them before I told her that we're actually going to include this in the book. So I really kept it very, like you said, like kept it really unbiased. Like she had no idea it was a creative. She loves creativity. So I kept it at that level. Well, just do this. Just it's like wondering why are we doing all this thematic pictures. I say, yeah, keep chipping. I'm going to try to build you up a little bit, give you creative challenges. And actually that's what happened, after the book was written, it's at a, at least older teenager adult level language, the language is more focused towards a young adult at the very least. But the principles are equally applicable to younger children. And, we haven't, like you were saying, we really need to drill those down at the school level. And that's what gave the another spark that, as well, how do we reach out to the kids? And then, I said, well, why don't I try to narrate this story in a simple language to her? Just tell her the story and ask her to write, each chapter. And then it started working. And after a couple of chapters, I said, yeah, let's take on the ambitious project. And, I narrated the story to her as we went. We adapted it to a child level story, not taking away the key principles. And then she wrote it, and then it became the publisher accepted it, and it became her own book, which is imminently going to be released now. So it was a great exercise. I think we need this today, right? I mean, all of us know challenges with parenting. It's often not easy to engage kids and get them to do different things. So it was a great lesson to kind of slowly build on the thing, endure through the challenges. And so her and her younger sister, they redid all the images for the new children's book because we didn't want to use the same ones. It all became sort of a really nice project for a year, a family project for a year. And I mean, it's funny, one of the reviewers, one of the beta reviewers for the book said, you should, this is a parenting mic drop moment. I said, well, we'll see about that. But it was true that it wasn't forced. We kind of slowly groomed it, because that kind of probably just makes them repulsive, but if you engage them in the purpose and, kind of drill down those values, they'll hopefully stick, right? I mean, like see one, do one, and kind of teach one kind of thing.
Well, I think what you said about your daughter doing the picture, I think it's interesting because when you didn't tell her it was about a book, so you didn't make it about something.
No, not
right?
at all.
So therefore, she got to be her true, authentic self, just drawing pictures just through her own lens, which was her being authentic. She loves creativity. So she was just being herself, which is really, in essence, that's what Soar is actually really all about.
Yeah, true. And, like engaging a 9, 10-year-old is, if you give them sort of the end result, it may not work, right? I mean, it just, for whatever reason, they just lose interest or they don't see the big picture. It just clouds their little mindset, right? So yeah, it really worked well this way that, we just worked through the process, and it was a chance to be authentic, like I said.
Yeah, so let's talk about Soar. There it is again, right? Soar, A Soul's Quest. So I'm just going to read something here from the preface, and just to set the stage with this, Ketan, and then we really want to talk about the book. But it's Soar's story is, we believe, broadly applicable to human experience across the globe, regardless of any demographic or social factors. This story is for everyone, regardless of age, race, gender, or any other identifier. The story is equally applicable for and to any preferred pronoun. Finally, we should say that we also intended this book to be food for thought regarding the issue of how we, as humans, interact with the animal kingdom, and indeed what our place is within the wider ecosystem. We hope you truly enjoy accompanying Soar, an eagle with anthropomorphic qualities on his journey. So let's talk about Soar, and I'd like to start with just sort of what was that occurred to you, like when you went out for a walk and started, and then walk me through the story. Walk actually, not myself. Of course, I've already read the book, but walk my audience through the story.
Yeah, so Soar really is a personification, right? I mean, it's not me or any one person, but it draws on the collective human experience. And Soar lives in a reasonably well-equipped, well-placed community of egos, and seemingly there's all these metrics of external success. He's a pro hunter. There's good family support, and everything seems great on the surface, but yet there's this internal conflict that he feels not really acknowledged. He doesn't feel authentic. He feels kind of pushed away. There's hierarchy, there's authority, there's xenophobia, there's rules, and there's rigidity. So there's this huge cognitive dissonance, which is true of so many humans, as we were just talking about during COVID and before. And then suddenly a very challenging event happens, and Soar is forced to make a decision. So this is the awakening moment, right? I mean, Soar is forced to make a decision. Is he going to put up with it, or is he going to go on his journey? And then he chooses the latter, and then decides to go on his journey. And then that turns out to be a phenomenal, challenging, often daunting, very difficult, often challenging his life hero's journey. Soar is all about a hero's journey. And then along the way, he meets friends, mentors, challengers, peer community, and then goes this inside out transformation to ultimately, experience the next elevated level of awareness. And then, as the story goes, there's an opportunity to come full circle and create meaningful, purposeful impact on his own community. So that's what Soar is about. It's about a hero's journey. Like, I think Brains magazine had done an interview, and the title of that was "Soar Story is Everyone's Story." There's no way that any human that has gone through life will not resonate with at least one or more aspects of Soar. They'll see Soar there. They will see the world through Soar's eyes, and they have to have part. Our challenges are so common that you would see the world through Soar's eyes, and it would be very relatable, because we all technically face. It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have the same needs,
Right.
just the proportion varies. And that's we think we're very complicated, but we're very simple as species, right? We have all these XYZ needs. It's what varies is the proportion of each of those factors, and that causes a lot of different problems. But and that's where Soar goes. That the more authentic we become, the more aligned we become, the more it's going to work out. Yes, and some people say, well, that's a lot of work. Yes, it is a lot of work. There's no discount to that. You can't win an Olympic gold medal without practicing. So, like you said, for people who practice higher spirituality, or do advanced meditation and all those practices, it is work. Like you can't do compressed 2-minute meditation and expect outstanding results. See, that's just the way it works. Right?
And hope is not a strategy,
Yes,
but
no.
I hope I win a gold medal, right? It's interesting you say this, because there was a friend of mine, and actually he's been on the podcast as well, Trevor Muir, great guy. I love his story, but it was so funny when he was going through, his trials and tribulations. It was a friend of him that says to him one day, he says, I want to let you know that you don't suffer from chronic uniqueness.
Yeah.
Right? You're you're not the only one, right? And if you think about all the trials and tribulations of life, and like when you actually really break it down, right, it is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're all the same needs,
Yeah.
and right, but we don't suffer from chronic uniqueness.
Yeah, and what you say, on other platforms also resonates, right? I mean, if you ask how many feel like an outlier, it's all of us.
Yeah.
Everybody's an outlier in some way, which means nobody's an outlier. I like that conclusion quite a lot, and
Yeah.
that's part of Soar, right? I mean, Soar feels like an outcast outlier many times, and that would be something that would resonate with a lot of people. Like they would. I'm sure that a lot of your audience and people you work with and train also feel the same way, because it's we work in complex systems, and there's high demand, there's pressures, there's competing priorities, and we have to meet the needs and deliverables, and it's hard, for a lot of people. So
Yeah. You know what's interesting is, of course, we both have. This is gonna be a bad joke. It's like a dad joke. We both speak foul. We both speak foul language, but we both. So we have birds. You have eagles. All right. I have ducks and geese. So we
yeah,
that's then actually that's one of the things we actually. So birds of a feather, obviously flock together. So, but it's interesting though. On that note, is that I ask a question to every group I speak to. It doesn't matter who it is. I ask the same question. And I say, at one point of your life, right, from the time that you were born to this very moment,
yeah,
with a show of hands, how many of you have ever felt like an odd duck?
yeah, everybody.
And everybody, I get that's 100% response 100% of the time, right? Because we all feel like we're all so weird, or we're new, we're different, or whatever it is, right? And yet, really, we're all kind of the same,
Yeah,
right? So I think that's really interesting.
that is amazing.
And so that's part of, like that's what I love about Soar, is, for myself, I mean, I didn't read it. I mean, of course, I read it as a story, but I read it more as an internal story. So I really wanted to relate to my circumstances, the events in my life, and what was my thought process and those kind of things. So I took it from an internal book, on a much, much deeper level, but that was just me. And as I said, I think I love that you say you can read it as a story, right? Or but you can go as deep as you are. I guess
Yeah.
actually I love that statement. So let me take you back to this just a second, Ketan. What was the moment that when you went for the walk? What was the moment that actually sparked you, that had made you create the sort of the one pager that